So here we are with Chapter 7, Part 2 practice test. On the identity page, on page 203, I only assign 3 problems. So I'm only going to do those 3 problems, starting with number 2. And as I look with tangent and cotangent, I notice that these are reciprocals of each other. So if I were to write tangent times 1 over tangent, that's what cotangent is, minus cosine squared of the angle, I know that this part here is 1 because tangent and tangent will cancel. So I have 1 minus cosine squared. And from the Pythagorean theorem, sine squared, or Pythagorean identity, plus cosine squared equals 1. And I know that if I were to subtract cosine squared, that is going to equal sine squared. And that's what I want to end up with. On number 5, on this one, I have cosine over 1 plus sine and 1 plus sine over cosine. So this is 2 fractions that I'm adding together. So what I need to do is get a common denominator, and my factors on the common denominator will be 1 plus sine and cosine. So this first fraction I need to multiply by cosine. So this is going to be cosine squared. And on this side I have to multiply by 1 plus sine of the angle. So this is a square of 1 plus sine. So this would be 1 plus 2 sine plus sine squared. And if I look at sine squared plus cosine squared, here I get 1. So I have 1 plus 1 is 2. So I have 2 plus 2 sine of theta over my common denominator. And on the top, I have a 2 in common in each of these terms. So I'm going to factor out that 2, and that gives me 1 plus sine theta. And I will be able to cancel a factor of 1 plus sine theta on top and on bottom. So here we go. And I'm left with 2 over cosine theta. And cosine theta on the denominator is really secant of theta, and I can write it like this: 1 over cosine. This right here is secant, so I have 2 secant. And that's what I want to have right here. And then on number 8, this, and I want to caution you, when you see a plus b inside the parentheses, do not distribute with sign. Okay, we need to refer back to the addition of 2 angles, because A and B represent 2 different angles. And that formula for sine of A plus B is sine A cosine B plus cosine A times sine of B. And on the bottom, I have cosine A and cosine B. Okay. So looking at the top, I'm not able to factor out anything to be able to cancel a factor on the bottom. So right now, everything is part of a sum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break up my fractions. I'm going to have a fraction here and then a fraction here that's added together. So this is sine A cosine B over cosine A cosine B, and I'm going to add to that cosine A sine B over cosine A cosine B. And when I do that, I will be able to cancel cosine B on top and bottom. And here I will be able to cancel cosine A. And with what's left here, I'll have a sine A over cosine A. Now that's just tangent of A. And over here, I have sine B over cosine B, which is tangent of B. And that's what I want to end up with. All right, next page. Sorry. So right here, number 8 up at the top says, I know that I have an angle that has sine of 6 over 10, and that angle is between pi over 2 and pi. So that would be quadrant 2 for our angle. So I want to draw this angle. So I'm going to draw, and from my vertex, I'm going to go into quadrant 2. Here's my right angle. Now my sine is 6 over 10. So the opposite side is 6 over the hypotenuse, which is 10. And here, this is one of those Pythagorean triples. This side is going to be 8 because 6 squared plus 8 squared equals 10 squared. Okay, and this is going to be negative 8 because of the negative direction. All right, so this is telling us to find sine of 2 theta. The formula tells me that I'm supposed to multiply 2 times sine theta times cosine theta. Well, it gives me sine theta, and after I fill out the triangle, I know that cosine theta is adjacent over hypotenuse. So cosine is going to be negative 8 over 10. So if I multiply these values together, I have 2 times 6 over 10 times negative 8 over 10. 2 times 6 is 12 times 8. This is negative 96 over 100. And I should reduce this to negative 24 over 25. In part B, I'm going to find cosine of half of the angle. So my angle is here. So I'm going to find whatever cosine of half of the angle is. So that formula is plus and minus 1 plus cosine over 2. And this 2 is still inside the square root. Now, because my triangle is in quadrant 2, cosine is negative in quadrant 2. So that means I want to use the negative value. So my answer, when I plug in the values, I'm going to have the negative value of 1 plus, now cosine was, we said, negative 8 over 10. And all of this is divided by 2. So now if I add these together, I'm going to have 1 plus negative, so that is minus 8 over 10. So this is 2 over 10 divided by 2, or 2 over 10 times 1/2. The 2's will cancel, so I have the square root of 1 over the square root of 10. And if I rationalize the denominator, I have the square root of 10 over 10. All right, so here it says to use the half angle formulas to find the exact values. All right, so if I have sine of negative pi over 6, all right, so basically when they say the exact values, that means they do not want you to use a calculator. Okay, and pretty much any of this here, we are not using a calculator. So I know that if I have negative pi over 6, this is in quadrant 4. And if I were to look at that angle, actually, sine of negative pi over 6 would be, I'm doing theta divided by 2. All right, so my angle divided by 2 is pi over 6. So my angle here is going to be pi over 3, or negative pi over 3, because this is negative. Okay, so negative pi over 3 divided by 2 is negative pi over 6. All right, so if sine of negative pi over 6, I'm sorry, I want to find sine of negative pi over 6. So I'm using my formula for half angle. So I'm going to put my formula in. I want the negative value because sine is negative in quadrant 4. The formula for a half angle and sine is 1 minus cosine of theta divided by 2. And I know that cosine of negative pi over 3, and cosine is 1/2. All right, so this is the negative value of 1 minus 1/2 over 2. So 1 minus 1/2 is 1/2 divided by 2. So this is 1/4 underneath the square root sign. Negative value of 1/4. So this is negative 1/2. Negative square root of 1 is 1, square root of 4 is 2. So negative 1/2. In part B, do a little separating here. In part B, our angle is 22.5. I know that this angle is half of 45. All right, so what I'm looking for is cosine of 45 divided by 2. So 45 is my angle that I'm looking at here. And my formula for a half angle would be And by the way, this is in quadrant 1 because 22.5 degrees is in quadrant 1. So that's a positive value for cosine. So I'm going to use the positive value of 1 plus cosine divided by 2. Now, cosine of 45 is square root of 2 over 2. So I'm going to put that in my formula, and I have 1 plus 2 square root of 2 divided by 2 over 2. All right, so here I'm going to make my 1 2 over 2, so I have a common denominator. So this gives me, I'm going to run out of room here, 2 plus the square root of 2 over 2, and now I'm going to multiply it by 1/2 because really it's divided by 2, but I can multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, and that's inside the root sign. So this is 2 square root of 2 divided by the square root of 4. Square root of 4 is 2, and on top I have 2 plus the square root of 2. There's my answer. Number 11 says, we know that in an angle, sine of A is 5 over 13. And this is in quadrant 1 because it's between 0 and pi over 2. We also know that in a second angle, the sine of that is negative 3 over 5. And this is in quadrant 3 because it's between pi and 3 pi over 2. And they're asking us to find the exact value. All right, so first of all, I'm going to draw a picture of this, what this looks like. And here we go. So angle A, we know it's in quadrant 1. Okay, this is angle A. And we know the sine is 5 over 13. So the opposite is 5. This is 13. And I need to do the Pythagorean theorem. So 5 squared plus what number squared is 13 squared? And that would be 12. And I just know that. This is 169 minus 25 is 144, and that is 12 squared. So here's angle A. Angle B is in quadrant 4. So I'm going to put that down here, or in quadrant 3, sorry. This is angle B right here. A is up here. Angle B says sine is negative 3 over 5. So if here's my angle, opposite is negative 3, the hypotenuse is 5. This is a 3, 4, 5 triangle, and if you don't know that, you can do the Pythagorean theorem. So this also is going to be negative because it's in the negative direction. Okay, so negative and negative. My hypotenuse is always a positive value. So here they're asking me to find cosine of A minus B. So I need to find that formula, and that ends up being cosine A cosine B plus sine A sine B. Okay, so from our formulas here, cosine of angle A would be adjacent over hypotenuse, so that's 12 over 13. Then cosine of B would be adjacent over hypotenuse, so that's negative 4 over 5. Then I'm going to add sine of angle A. Well, they told us sine is 5 over 13. And sine of angle B, they told us is negative 3/5. So if I multiply these together, negative 48 over 65 plus negative 15 over 65. So if I add these together, 48 and 15, that's 63. And that's negative over 65. Now they're asking us to find sine of angles A plus B. All right, so that formula will be sine A cosine B plus cosine A sine B. Okay. So referring back to my triangles again. Okay, so remember, I'm looking at angle A. They told us that sine of A is 5 over 13. Cosine of B, so now I'm going to B, cosine is negative 4, side adjacent, over hypotenuse. So this is negative 4 over 15. I'm sorry, negative 4 over 5, not 15. So 5 times negative 4, that's negative 20 over 65. Then I'm going to add cosine of A. So cosine is 12 over the hypotenuse, 12 over 13. And then sine of B, they tell us is negative 3/5. All right. Times negative 3/5. I just put it in the wrong spot. So I'm adding 20 over 65 plus 12 times negative 3, that's negative 60 over 65. So this is, how about if I redo this? 12 times negative 3 is negative 36. There we go. So 12 times 3, negative 36. I'm going to add that to negative 20. So that's negative 56 over 65. Sorry about that mess there. Number 12 asks us to find the exact value of this expression here. And if I think about what this expression is, it is a addition. Oh, actually, I don't know if it's addition or not. I'm going to look back at my formulas for either add or subtract. All right, so I am going to look when I have sine of A, cosine of B, and then plus cosine A, sine of B. This formula comes from sine of A plus B. And that A plus B is, A is 30, and B is 90, or B is 60, getting ahead of myself here, which is sine of 90. And we know that sine of 90 is 1. Part B, if I look at the formula, I have cosine of 130 times cosine 10 plus sine 130 sine 10. So my angle A is 130, my angle B is 10. When I have cosines together and sines together, this is actually finding the cosine, and it is 130 minus, this is a cosine difference formula that gives me the plus in the middle, 30 minus 10, 130 minus 10 is 120. And cosine of 120 is negative 1/2. Number 14, if cosine of theta is 5/12, and in this case it's between negative pi/2 and 0, so this is quadrant 4. They want us to find the exact value. So if this is in quadrant 4 and I'm using, or I'm finding sine of half of that angle, I am going to use the formula (1 minus cosine of my angle divided by 2. Well, cosine of my angle is 5/12. So this gives me 1 minus 5/12 divided by 2. 1 minus 5/12, so this is 12/12. Minus 5/12 is 7/12. And I'm going to divide by 2 or multiply by 1/2. So this gives me 7/24 inside the square root sign. And if I simplify the square root of 24, this is actually going to be 6 times 4 is 24. So the square root of 4 is 2, and then I have the square root of 6. Now to get rid of the denominator square root, I need to multiply by the square root of 6 on top and bottom. So this is the square root of 42 over 2 square root of 6. All right, so that looks like it's pretty simplified. Last one, cosine of half of the angle. So cosine of half of the angle, that formula is 1 plus 5/12, that's cosine of theta. So it's 1 plus cosine theta divided by 2. So cosine theta, I just plug that in. So 1 plus 5/12, so 12/12 plus 5/12 is 17/12. And I'm going to divide by 2 or multiply by 1/2. So this is the square root of 17 over the square root of 24. And again, this on the bottom is 2 times the square root of 6. Ooh, and I made a mistake over here. So when I multiply by the square root of 6 on top and bottom, this becomes 6. So 6 times 2 is 12. And 17 times 6 is 102. Okay, so there we go. So over here, I made a mistake. This should be 6. So 2 times 6 is 12. So I've got the square root of 42 divided by 12. All right, so that is it. All right, good luck on your test.